A diverse and inclusive force is a war-fighting imperative. This is on a slide at the Air Force Academy.
Interesting statement. Diversity as a combat imperative. What do you think, viewers? Does diversity really determine the effectiveness of the military? Or is it just a fashion trend? Share your thoughts. Do you agree that military forces should focus on it?
General Clark, do you agree with that statement?
I do agree with that statement, sir.
So, I mean, were the Mongols diverse?
Well, sir, I'm not really as versed on Mongol warfighting as I am on U.S. warfighting.
Were the Vikings diverse?
Comparing modern military forces to the Vikings is a bold move. The crux of the matter seems to be whether diversity actually enhances effectiveness. Viewers, do you think cultural and gender differences played an important role in the great armies of the past?
Again, sir, I'm looking at our country, the most diverse country in the world.
Sure, but this is about a warfighting imperative. How about the force in Ukraine? Are the Ukrainians fighting the Russians a diverse force?
Sir, once again, my concern is the people that I'm charged to build into leaders.
Right, but you would acknowledge that throughout history, including present history, that statement hasn't borne true in every example, right?
Sir, what I would say is that those countries have to rely on the full force of their population to build a war-fighting force to win our wars, and that's why it's important for us to be diverse, because our nation...
So let's look at the population that actually makes up the fighting force frequently. Now, we have more men than women, right? 70-30-ish?
That's
right.
Correct.
And
the ratio is 70 to 30, and that reflects the reality of the Army. But I wonder then, how do you explain programs that exclude a large portion of service members based on gender? Viewers, how much do you think such initiatives help the Army?
And of the men we have, most of them are not transgender men. Most of them are cisgender men, right?
Yes, sir.
But yet, at our academies, we push something called the Brooke Owens Fellowship. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yes, sir.
And in that fellowship, it specifically says, if you are a cisgender man, this program isn't for you.
Direct exclusion of a group of people as part of inclusion. How does this work? I wonder if such a policy is considered truly fair, or does it undermine the very idea of equality? Write your opinions.
So you just said that your answer on why we do this full hug of these diversity concepts is because it's all about the fighting force that we draw from. But you're literally pushing a program in the academies that says, if you're a cisgender woman, a transgender woman, a non-binary, agender, bigender, two-spirit, demigender. What's demigender?
Sir,
when the people promoting these programs themselves can't explain the terms used, it raises a lot of questions. If you don't know what demigender means, why do you support it? Viewers, do you think it's acceptable to promote policies based on terms no one understands?
That's a term of the people that are eligible for that particular scholarship that is available to. It's a person who looks at their gender in a different way than I do, sir.
Well, sure, that's all of these people. You're a cisgender man. You don't even get to apply.
Well,
do you know what demigender really means?
I'm not really sure, sir.
Right. So, do you know what agender means? All one word, not a space gender, but agender.
Sir, I don't.
Right, so here we are pushing a fellowship, calling for people that you don't even know what the words mean, and the number one group of people, the cisgender men, are excluded. Now, in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion, should we be pushing programs that we can't define that exclude the largest group of service members?
Well, sir, first, that program is not an Air Force Academy program. It's a program open to our entire country.
Right,
so
but you guys advocate for it within the academy.
We allow our cadets to apply for it.
Why are you allowing your cadets to apply for a program when you cannot define the basic terms of eligibility?
Now, this question hits the very point. How can a program be supported if its basic criteria are unclear? Shouldn't such initiatives be crystal clear, especially at a military academy? Share your thoughts.
because it's an opportunity for us to develop them as warfighters, and we look for every
But you don't
opportunity
even know
that
what
we
the
can.
words mean. How can you use this as a way to develop the warfighters if you don't know what it means?
Well, some of those terms may not be applicable to us at the Air Force Academy, but some are. And
But if you don't know what they mean, it's hard to tell if they're applicable or not. So I think one of the reasons why some of this stuff has gotten into the academies is because we don't have the same oversight from the Board of Visitors. And, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from the Washington Examiner entitled, "To Push Woke Ideology, Biden Illegally Gutted Military Academy Oversight Boards." And so in this piece, it goes through a timeline where on September 8th, 2021, all of President Trump's appointees were fired. On September 17th, Secretary Austin created Board of Visitors subcommittees, and then he populated those subcommittees with people who weren't on the Board of Visitors. Have you ever seen that happen before?
Sir, our Board of Visitors is populated and supports us in great fashion.
Right,
So
but what about the subcommittee? Are there people on the Board of Visitors subcommittees who are not on the Board of Visitors?
I can't answer that, sir.
Seems like something we ought to know.
Yes, sir. I'm not sure.
Right, but that would be odd, right? I mean, let me ask the question this way. You don't have any basis to disagree with the reporting here in the Washington Examiner that literally we have people who are not on the Board of Visitors who are serving on these subcommittees. You have no basis to disagree with that, do you?
Sir, I'm not exactly sure the question you're asking, so I'll have to take that for record so I can understand what you're
Look forward to
exactly what
future
you're
rounds, I
asking.
hope. Thank you. Let's put the slideshow back up that we were discussing earlier. This was at the Air Force Academy instructing students on how to use inclusive language. We had Secretary Kendall here, and when we got into the whole mom and dad thing, Secretary Kendall said, yeah, we probably aren't going to tell students they can't say mom and dad. That was inartful. So if there are other things here that are inartful that you want to disclaim, that's a totally reasonable thing for a person to do. So I want to start with this contention that to be inclusive, cadets would have to not use the term colorblind or say we're all just people. Is there something wrong with aspiring to be colorblind in the United States military? And
criticizing the idea of colorblindness sounds like a denial of one of the core values of the civil rights movement. Shouldn't we judge people by their qualities, not by the color of their skin? Write in the comments whether you think such rhetoric undermines ideas of equality.
Particularly the Air Force Academy.
Sir, I think it depends on how a person uses that term in context. I think that most people, if you're of a different race or a different color, that you don't want to be, you want to be seen for who you are. You don't want someone to look at you and not see, in my case, a black man, because that's who I am. I don't want you to be blind to that, but I want a person to accept that and to understand that and to include me as if they would include any other person that might be of a different color.
Well, we as a country were in many ways educated on the concept of colorblindness through the civil rights movement. And in Dr. King's many remarks, he would talk about the virtue of judging one another not by the color of our skin, not you as a black man, me as a white man, but by the content of our character. Do you worry that the Air Force's critique of colorblindness could be viewed as a critique of the very values that undergird the civil rights movement?
I don't think so. In my interpretation of Dr. King's words, he's not saying don't recognize the color of a person. He's saying once you recognize it, don't judge them by that color.
Didn't Dr. King explicitly call for colorblindness?
I think he called for what he said. Don't judge people by the, and that's why I meant.
I want to use, because we're talking about specific terms and language.
Right.
So Dr. King did explicitly call for colorblindness, right?
He may have. I'm not sure of when he did that.
I'm just starting to think maybe instead of like teaching that we shouldn't say boyfriend or girlfriend or mom or dad or whatever, maybe we should actually get back to the core of the values of the civil rights movement, because if we learned about, you would be able to answer these questions more thoroughly if maybe we had a greater connection to the thoughts of Dr. King and maybe a little less Ibram X. Kendi. What about the statement, we're all just people?
The phrase, we're all just people, is suddenly controversial. Doesn't that sound like inclusion? How then can unity be promoted if basic phrases are interpreted as offensive? Viewers, do you agree that striving for simple equality is the basis for unity?
What's offensive about that?
I wonder what exactly makes such a phrase problematic. If we are all equal, why not say so directly? It seems that current approaches to language create more confusion than they solve problems. Do you think such changes are really helpful?
It's not that it's offensive, sir.
Well, it's not inclusive, because this is saying not, underlined, not, we're all just people. So why is that a not? I thought we're all just people. That sounds inclusive to me.
In the context that this slide was presented, what the folks who presented it were saying was recognize people for who they are, that we don't always all look alike, that we're not always of the same
But
gender.
why do the words "we're all just people" serve as an affront to that concept?
Well, I think the idea is that we should all be treated as equals. We should.
Well,
all
what
be
about
treated
we're all
as
just
equals.
people? But I got to get you back to the words on your
Okay.
slide here.
Yes, sir.
So the words on your slide say we're all just people, and you say that's a bad thing because we have to say that we're all equal. Does that seem so circular to you?
Well, I think in the context that it was presented, the slide is a bit out of context when you can't present it in the way that it was presented to the cadets.
I mean, I've gone through two of them. I'm providing as much context as I can. Are cadets are punished if they talk about color blindness in a positive way?
Absolutely
Are
not.
they punished if they say boyfriend or girlfriend rather than partner?
Absolutely not.
Are they punished if they say the disabled as opposed to people with disabilities?
They are not.
Are they punished if they say transgenders instead of transgender people or service members?
They are not.
Are they punished if they say mom or dad instead of parents, caregivers, or guardians?
They are not.
Okay then, so why are we teaching it?
This is a key question. If such things are not punishable, then why emphasize them? Maybe we should focus on more pressing issues. Share your thoughts on what priorities should be in the Army.
What we're teaching is to understand a person's context, to understand how to talk to people within their context so as not to offend until you get to know your people. And that's how we build effective
What I
teams.
think you have to realize is that when you critique colorblindness and when you critique statements like we're all just people, that is the divisive activity, that in the name of diversity and equity and inclusion, we see some of the most divisive rhetoric. I see my time's expired. I yield back. Dr. Martinez-Lopez, is the Department of Defense covering up vaccine injuries?
Congressman, no.
So who is Lieutenant Ted Macy?
Congressman, I don't know the lieutenant.
Well, it's sort of the reason we're here. On November 27, 2023, Navy Medical Corps Officer Lieutenant Ted Macy shared a video on X.
A lieutenant trying to bring the Truth Faces reprisals. Is this what we call transparency? Why are those who signal problems most often silenced? Write in the comments what you think of such a system.
Where he expressed grave concern for his patients suffering after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. And according to Lieutenant Macy, he tried reporting the DoD data from the DMED system to his superiors, and he was subsequently silenced and punished. He lost access to the DMED system. He's been removed from seeing his patients and has been relegated to some broom closet somewhere to continue his service. It seems to me that Lieutenant Macy has suffered more than the people who screwed up the DMED system. So why is this person being punished for trying to showcase data that was alarming?
Congressman, I'm not prepared to talk about specifics on the lieutenant because I really don't know, but I'll be glad to answer any questions regarding the system of the vaccines and our findings.
Well, right, but part of the system and the vaccines and how we conduct oversight is that if there are whistleblowers who say that you're not doing your job right, and if there are whistleblowers concerned about a cover-up, there's a process by which that has to get to the Inspector General and be reviewed. And in the case of Lieutenant Macy's concerns, those languished for like more than 5 months. Do you have any reason why a request made through the chain of command to view this data that could illuminate concerns over vaccine injuries was smothered?
Again, Congressman, I'm not prepared to talk details
Okay,
on
well,
the
maybe
lieutenant, I'll have
let's get to
defer
what you're
the
prepared to
Navy.
talk about. Let's get to the actual data that's so concerning. Since the people who raise concerns about the data, they get punished and we don't seem to remember them. The hypertensive diseases, up 23% when you compare the 2016 to 2020 averages to cases in 2021. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
So, okay, so hypertensive diseases up 23%. Then ovarian dysfunction up 35%.
The increase in morbidity is alarming. Why are these data not analyzed in detail? Isn't it important to understand how a vaccine or virus is linked to these outcomes? Share your thoughts on how much such data needs attention.
Does that sound right?
I'm not specific. Can we?
Does that sound right, Dr. Stallman?
I think you're referencing something from an older document, but it could be.
Oh, I'm referencing data from the Defense Medical Surveillance System. Is that a system that you're both familiar with?
Yes.
Okay, so that system says that hypertensive diseases up 23%, ovarian dysfunction up 35%, pulmonary embolisms, which as we all know can kill you, up 43%. Myocarditis, as Chairman Banks was describing, up 151%. Is it really your testimony that these massive spikes in these serious ailments are a consequence of contracting COVID? Is that your best medical opinion?
Congressman, not all, but I mean, many of them, obviously, ovarian dysfunction, there are other reasons. Emboli, there's other reasons. But yes, there's there's a correlation, not only from our data, but the data of CDC that yes, correlate COVID with having higher likelihood of having some of
just
these
pardon me
events.
for not treating the CDC
Not the variant
assessment.
one, but the other.
The vaccine or the virus?
Both. The virus, and like the cardiomyopathy is a little bit higher. The risk is much higher if you just get the disease, but you have an enhanced risk. Not as big as when you get the infection, but you do get some risk from getting the vaccine. It's minimal, but yes.
So there is vaccine risk associated with hypertensive diseases, right?
Hypertension, help me out. Not that I'm aware of, but
Okay, well, how about ovarian dysfunction?
not that I'm aware of.
And how about pulmonary embolisms?
Yes.
Okay, so you're here giving us testimony that the vaccine increases someone's risk of pulmonary embolism.
No, pulmonary emboli, the COVID virus does
No,
increase.
I'm asking about the vaccine.
No, the vaccine, no,
Okay,
not that I
no.
know of.
No, and myocarditis, you think there is
Yes,
a
sir.
risk?
A slightly higher risk, but it's much higher than when you get the virus itself, when you get infected.
And to tease out those data distinctions, wouldn't it be responsible to assess these conditions in people who got the disease and were unvaccinated versus the people who got the disease and were vaccinated? Has that type of an analysis been done?
We did look at this in the DoD report on cardiac and kidney conditions. The information stratified by all the different ways, vaccinated, not vaccinated, those are not all included in the report. I do have the data on that. When we reported the 10 times increase rate due to recent infection, that is adjusting for vaccination status. It's also adjusting for demographic risk factors, including age, sex, and BMI.
Right, so did that analyze ovarian dysfunction?
It did not.
Why are such important aspects overlooked? Ignoring the data does not make the problem any less significant. Why do you think there is still no accurate analysis of such cases?
Did it analyze pulmonary embolisms?
It did not.
And did it analyze hypertensive diseases?
It did not.
Well, I mean, we got thousands more people than the average in 2021 getting hypertensive diseases, thousands more people getting ovarian dysfunction, hundreds more people getting these pulmonary embolisms. What's the case against analyzing those conditions that have seen these increases in the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated?
We are continuing to do surveillance on these conditions, and we are open to doing additional work on this. With chronic conditions, it is tricky to look at that in relation to a vaccine.
Is a pulmonary embolism a chronic condition, or is it an acute condition?
We can look at acute conditions.
Yeah, Paul, your medical knowledge goes far beyond mine, but I would consider a pulmonary embolism acute, not chronic.
With hypertension, it could be difficult to get causal evidence to link that to the vaccine, but yes, we can look at acute outcomes.
Right, but see, that's how you get the causal evidence. The reason there are people concerned that the DoD is engaging in a cover-up here is because you seem to be willfully and purposefully ignorant to those comparisons on these ailments that are skyrocketing now. For pregnant women, for people who get pulmonary embolisms, for people with hypertension, and in the one area you've looked, myocarditis, you're here giving testimony that actually causes this increased risk factor. And so, Mr. Chairman, I hope we continue to follow up on this, because my deep concern is that there is a cover-up here and that they're playing games with the data so that we can't actually assess whether it's the vaccine or the ailment that is causing these acute conditions. And, I mean, wouldn't it be a tragic thing to have to discover that we hurt people with the vaccine more so than the virus did with the ailment, particularly in a condition where now the CDC, whose opinion I guess we treat like the gospel, is saying that you just should quarantine for 24 hours after you're done with your fever. So they have evolving sensibilities on this, and the only way we get to the bottom of it is that data comparison. I thank the chair's indulgence, and I yield back.
We discussed many important topics today, from inclusiveness in the military to vaccine issues. What do you think is the key to trusting these institutions? Share your thoughts in the comments. Give us a like if you're in favor of honesty and transparency.